Caleb Chandler, Devaughn Mortimer, and Kobe Baynes. We will discuss all three on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credentialed media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. Also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time, as always, to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. A lot of football talk on today's episode of the show. We will begin by discussing Louisville offensive lineman Caleb Chandler being named a preseason AP First-Team All-American. We will then transition into discussing what two players in Devaughn Mortimer and Kobe Baynes not being with the program this fall means for the Louisville team as a whole and for the position groups, respectively. So we will start out by talking about Caleb Chandler, one of the most important players on this Louisville Cardinals football team. Has gotten a lot of high praise from services like Pro Football Focus, where he was, I think, named a preseason first-team All-American. But the preseason All-American teams came out for the Associated Press on Monday, and Louisville offensive lineman Caleb Chandler was listed in the first team. He is the first preseason first-team All-American named by the Associated Press since Jair Alexander back in 2017. So you can kind of see the weight of this award that it holds throughout. And really, I think that this really doesn't come as a true surprise to myself, but it's still awesome to see Caleb Chandler getting the recognition he deserves when you look at what he's been able to do over the past couple of seasons. Since 2019, the Cardinals have played, the Cardinals have played 37 games. Now, remember, 2020 had the COVID-shortened season, so only 11 games. In those 37 games, Caleb Chandler has started 37 games. Sometimes the best ability is availability, especially for some of the best players on the team. So, huge news there for Louisville is the fact that Caleb Chandler is going to play a huge role this upcoming season. Now, yes, it is a very veteran-led group. There is a lot of players on this offensive line that have played a ton of snaps here at Louisville. They played multiple seasons. They're pretty much returning 4/5 of their starting offensive line, and the other position that they're not returning, Cole Bentley, who graduated, well, Brian Hudson is sliding into the center position where he had a lot of significant time at that position last season. So it's kind of like you're returning a starter at the center position without returning a starter. But overall, this is just big news for the Cardinals. For a player that has 40 starts under his belt, was the first offensive lineman to earn first-team All-ACC honors for the Louisville Cardinals since I believe it was Mekhi Becton did so back in 2019. Last season, he was named a Pro Football Focus first-team All-American. The team averaged about 213 yards on the ground. He was named the ACC Offensive Lineman of the Week after his performance versus Boston College in that victory over the Eagles last fall. He's been a pivotal point, to say the least, for this offensive line. Look, I know that it's not as maybe focused on as the left tackle position is, which is pretty much the most important position on the line and one of the most important positions in football, especially if you have a right-handed quarterback. But I will say that you cannot overlook the significance of having a guy like Caleb Chandler on the interior, because you look at what this offense wants to do. It wants to continue to get better, and one of the reasons it's been able to do so excuse me, one of the reasons that the offense has really just been able to get better is the continuity on offense and that veteran leadership on offense that they have. And having a guy like Caleb Chandler, come in and, as a 4-star prospect, not really play much his first year, got 3 starts his second year. And then since 2019, he has started every single game on the offensive line. Having that continuity is big, but it's even bigger for this year's team. I've mentioned a couple times when we've discussed Caleb Chandler on the Locked On Louisville podcast that I believe that there is a chance that Chandler could end up as a first-round pick in the 2023 NFL Draft. Now, obviously, being an older guy, I think he's 24 or about to turn 24. That might work against him a little bit in terms of his age on draft day. But still, I think that if he's able to stay healthy this season, if he's able to put forward a year to where he's, staying the course and being, that big force in the middle of that Louisville offensive line, and he plays over 75% of the games, I mean, I don't know why he couldn't be a first-team All-American at the end of the season and a first-round NFL draft pick. So that's something to look for in all reality, because I do think that this is going to be one of the things that we talk about. Yeah, sure, a left guard is returning, but when you focus on how big of a leader he's been on that offensive line for the past couple seasons, getting that continuity, having a player who has a lot of snaps under his belt, he's very battle-tested. It's going to help the Louisville offense be proficient yet again. And, we heard from, I think it was Caleb Chandler in ACC Media Day, and it's something that I don't think a lot of people really understand, is that sometimes it's hard for offensive linemen to block for a dual threat quarterback, because you never really know if they're going to tuck and run or throw on the run. So you have to be very disciplined, especially when it comes to holding and stuff like that. It's easy to kind of get caught holding a player downfield when you don't realize that your quarterback is about to run. And having that continuity on the offensive line for Malik Cunningham in his final season, that's something that kind of gets lost in the sauce here. Is, yes, it's great to have your offensive line return of a lot of players regardless, because you have the continuity, you have a solid group that's going to help protect not only your quarterback but the ball carriers as well in the backfield. But you can take it a little bit of a step more and realize that, hey, look, you have a mobile quarterback, one of the best dual threat quarterbacks, not only in the conference, but also in the entire country. Yes, he maybe wants to be a little bit better of a pocket passer this year. Who knows what we will see in terms of tendencies for Malik Cunningham. Even if he's looking to become a better pocket passer, I still think he's going to utilize his legs, because that's a big strength of his, is being able to create something seemingly out of nothing. So, yes, to wrap things up, yes, it's important to have a good amount of your offensive line back. It's even more important to have it when you have a mobile dual threat quarterback, because you're playing with guys that are familiar with the playing style. You know some of Malik Cunningham's tendencies. You know how he's going to operate in read option situations, so on and so forth. So I know that this was kind of talked about in terms of the collective offensive line and not so much Caleb Chandler, but he plays a big part in this offensive line, and he is a leader on this team. He's a leader on the offensive line. He joked at ACC Media Day about how guys, call him the older guy. I forget the term that they use to describe him, or the nickname that they gave him due to him being older than pretty much everyone on the line. But it kind of goes to show you that even though there's a lot of returning guys, that Caleb Chandler is kind of the leader on this offensive line, and having that in the middle of the offensive line is an asset for your offense on all ends of the spectrum, from the running offense to protecting Malik Cunningham to being on the right track and staying on the same page as an offensive line in terms of communication as well. It's a big key. And for being the first preseason AP First-Team All-American since Jair Alexander back in 2017, look, there's been a lot of solid players to come out of this program since then. This is big news, and I think that it captures just how incredibly special it is that Louisville gets another season with Caleb Chandler on the offensive line. So that's something to focus on as we move forward, and that's something that we can't overlook when it comes to the success that Louisville's offense is likely going to have, is the continuity on that offensive line. And it starts with Caleb Chandler. So, but as much as we like to talk about the returning players, unfortunately for the remainder of the show, we are going to talk about the impacts, the respective impacts of players that will not be on the team this fall. We will begin with discussing former four-star receiver Devaughn Mortimer, and what his absence means for the Louisville wide receiving group moving forward. We will do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, golf, and esports. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening. BetOnline, where the game starts. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. The ultimate college football preview is here, a 7-episode preview with college experts, local team experts, and Odyssey college football insiders. It's everything you need to be ready for the college football season in one spot. Search for Ultimate College Football Preview on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. So moving right along, talking about the first of two players that it was recently announced that they would not be on the team next season. This upcoming season, we begin by talking about 2022 signee Devon Mortimer, the 4-star wide receiver out of the Fort Lauderdale area down in South Florida. Hadn't made it to campus yet. It seemed like there was a lot of silence surrounding his status over the past couple months, as seemingly Devon Mortimer was figuring some things out off the field. I'm not going to fuel into speculation or talk about any of the specifics that people have been discussing on social media and things of that nature. The only thing there is to say now is that Devon Mortimer will not be on the team this fall. Regardless of where he ends up, we wish him the best of luck in his next program, whatever team that he plays with. Moving forward, we wish him the best of luck. But in terms of the Louisville offense, not only this season, but the years to come, immediately speaking, the good news for the Cardinals, if you're able to find a small positive in this news for Louisville, is really just kind of focusing on what you have in the group now. There are players that Devon Mortimer is similar to in terms of his playing style. You know, a smaller receiver listed at 5'9", a very explosive athlete, quick with the ball in his hands. You have guys like Huggins-Bruce, Braden Smith, Josh Johnson that can fill that role that Devon Mortimer would likely be put into here at Louisville. The issue with the Cardinals offense right now is the fact that this position only has about 8 scholarship receivers: Josh Johnson, Braden Smith, Tyler Hudson, D. Wiggins, Huggins-Bruce, Chris Bell, and Chance Morrow. That's actually 7, not 8. So 7 receivers now. And I know that, maybe Jalen Carter gets put on scholarship, the former Eastern Kentucky transfer. But this kind of leads you to now think, okay, you didn't have depth in the first place. Now you truly don't have depth with only 7 players. You have the guys that can step into the mix and record some solid production. I mean, the 2 transfers coming in, D. Wiggins and Tyler Hudson, have been apparently pretty solid in fall season camp. And they're going to be playing big roles. Braden Smith is healthy now and apparently looks pretty solid, according to strength and conditioning coach Ben Souders. And then you have 2 freshmen that are looking solid as well, in Chris Bell and Chance Morrow. Chris Bell was the player that I looked at on the offense and thought, this is going to be the true freshman that is going to make the biggest impact. So, you have those 2 guys, and then you have a veteran like Josh Johnson, who if he can stay healthy, is a guy that has shown that, he can be a solid contributor in this offense. And then Amari Huggins-Bruce is likely going to be one of the top two receivers on this team. Very, very explosive. As I mentioned, kind of a T.Y. Hilton comparison. Once he touches the ball, you get him the ball in space. It's tough to bring him down. Scott Satterfield all last year in his press conferences made it a point of emphasis to say that, look, we're going to try to get Amari Huggins-Bruce the ball out in space. So that's something to focus on here when you move forward with this offense and how they're going to operate this season. Even if Devaughn Mortimer were to join the team this fall, it was likely that he was going to start out by being a depth piece and kind of injury insurance. But needless to say, the health of the wide receiving committee is of the utmost importance, because all it takes is 1 to 2 guys maybe to go down, and you're looking at things really challenging. Braden Smith went down last season, and they were able to kind of plug Amari Huggins-Bruce into that mix, but they lost a huge component of the offense. So that's something that you have to look forward to moving, towards the season, is that, Devaughn Mortimer, maybe he was going to start out on the bench this season, maybe only playing in special teams, but still it was a very talented player that they added to the mix, and a surprising signing day flip from Florida State last year. So it's a huge loss no matter how you look at it. Moving forward, spanning beyond this season, you could be losing I think you're losing Josh Johnson. Braden Smith likely is gone to the NFL. Same with Tyler Hudson and D. Wiggins. I mean, look at things there. I mean, of the 7, next season you could be left with Amari Huggins-Bruce, Chris Bell, and Chance Morrow as your returning guys, and that's not ideal. Obviously, you have some very highly rated guys coming in, like DeAndre Moore Jr., who's a top 100 player, William Fowles, 4-star out of the Miami area, Jaleel McClain, who can play either wide receiver or defensive back, a 4-star prospect out of St. John Bosco that already has the chemistry with future Louisville Cardinal Pierce Clarkson. There has been talks of maybe adding like Deuce Robinson, who is the number 1 tight end, who would be used as a wide receiver. And that's another point of emphasis that could be made this year, is that Marshawn Ford could also be used out wide, an H-back that can be used as a fullback, tight end, wide receiver. Last year, they tried to get him the ball more, out in space, out by the sidelines. So that's maybe an interesting point of emphasis that could be made, that they look to maybe put Marshawn Ford out wide if they need to, after seeing what Florida was able to do with Kyle Pitts. But back to the recruiting aspect of things, it means probably that you're going to see Scott Satterfield and company add, maybe 1 to 2 more receivers into the mix, look to go maybe the grad transfer route or the transfer portal route like they did with Tyler Hudson and D. Wiggins, maybe a guy with extra eligibility that you could see, come into the mix and maybe play a couple seasons for the Cardinals. But that's an interesting conversation to have. But that's why having guys like DeAndre Moore Jr., William Fowles, and also, Jaleel McClain, 3 highly rated recruits in the mix already. You have that opportunity to pitch early playing time next season, and it'll be interesting to see if Deuce Robinson is added to the mix as well, and that would definitely go a long way with alleviating some of those concerns for the position group next season. So we're going to now transition over into discussing what the other loss to the program will mean for the respective position group. Offensive lineman tackle Kobe Baynes entered the transfer portal within the past week. He has found a landing spot at Kansas, where he will play for the Jayhawks. We'll talk about what that means for the offensive line moving forward here in just a second. As always, I do want to take this time to say thank you all for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Kobe Baynes was a member of the 2020 class, ranked just inside of the top 1,000, ranked as the 974th best player in the class. 6'4", native of Jacksonville, Florida, had offers from Miami, South Carolina, Appalachian State, Arkansas, going down the list, Florida State, so on and so forth, Michigan, Mississippi. So an underrated prospect, seemingly judging by his offer list. Kobe Baynes was just never able to crack into the two deep. I'm not sure that he ever played a true snap with the Cardinals. If he did, it was this past season, but it doesn't say so on GoCards.com. Was a mid-year enrollee, an offensive guard that was kind of transitioned over into the tackle position, I believe. But regardless, we wish Kobe the best of luck. And, that's one of the other aspects of this that doesn't get talked about is when you do have a lot of guys returning on that offensive line and you continue to add other talented prospects into the bunch, you're going to have a limited amount of playing time available, and some players are going to look to transfer out. Tim Lawson, I believe he was a player that opted to transfer at the end of this past season. Trying to find where he ended up at. Can't find it at the moment. But regardless, Tim Lawson was the first offensive lineman to enter the portal. Kobe Baynes is following behind him. This season, obviously, it doesn't mean a ton truly because it seems like we had the two deep kind of put into place. You had your starters on the offensive line, Trevor Reed, or Michael Gonzalez, Caleb Chandler, Brian Hudson, Adonis Boone, Renato Brown, and then behind them you had one of Trevor Reed or Michael Gonzalez. You had Austin Collins, a highly rated guy out of high school. You had a player like Luke Kandra, who also slid into the mix. I'm not sure if Kobe Baynes had cracked that too deep at the time. I'm looking at that currently on that depth chart that was released back in late July. So Kobe Baynes was listed as the backup to Renato Brown at the right tackle position. Josh Black was another backup at the right guard position. So Baynes was being transformed into a tackle. Renato Brown, a redshirt sophomore, is listed as the starter at right tackle. So you do have the conversation needs to be had of adding another player into that mix at right tackle to replace him in the two deep. Seemingly, there are a lot of talented guys on this team that are extremely young. Aaron Gunn, Max Cabana, Isaiah Reed, Sam Seacrest. I think it's Maquette, either Guay or Gay is how it's pronounced. I've heard it pronounced a couple of different ways. I do apologize if I am butchering that pronunciation. But regardless, this offensive line does have solid numbers. They have options to play at the line. There were about 7 to 8 guys that new offensive line coach Nick Cardwell felt comfortable with. So obviously injuries to that position could prove to be interesting if it's a guy like Renato Brown that goes down at the right tackle position, with Baynes being the right tackle. But wish him the best of luck. At this point, we're looking at, most of the depth being filled. It's going to be interesting to see who rises into the mix to replace Baynes. But moving forward from a recruiting standpoint, you have a handful of players committed already for the Flyville 23 class, some highly rated offensive linemen. You have interior offensive lineman Madden Sanker. You have interior offensive lineman Jordan Church. And then you have offensive tackle Luke Burgess, who could slide into the mix over at that other tackle position, kind of depending on what happens and who leaves. You're going to have some guys like Caleb Chandler, possibly Brian Hudson to the NFL, some other guys that are going to graduate and try the NFL route as well. So there's going to be some starting spots open next year. This probably means, the loss of Kobe Baynes means that we could see Scott Satterfield and company, seemingly going after, a handful of more offensive linemen. I know that they were going after some more already, so maybe they look to the transfer portal to get, a immediately ready, battle-tested offensive lineman. Maybe they look to put Michael Gonzalez on the interior or move him to the right tackle position. Maybe he's the replacement for Caleb Chandler on the interior. Maybe Madden Sanker rises right into the starting lineup as a freshman on the interior. There's a lot of different conversations that need to be had. But with the loss of Kobe Baynes, it wouldn't surprise me if the staff looks to add one more offensive lineman, one more than they already previously were at the end of this season, whether that be in the transfer portal or in the 2023 class. So we discussed Caleb Chandler, Devaughn Mortimer, Kobe Baynes. Tomorrow's episode will be dedicated to Lamar Jackson. And I'm excited to have a special guest on the show to discuss Lamar Jackson's season and contract status. But before we get out of here, I want to give a shout out to the Locked On ACC podcast hosted by Candace Cooper. No better way to find your overall conference news than that show. You can find both Locked On Louisville and Locked On ACC 5 days a week, your team every day on YouTube or whatever streaming service you use. But that's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We will see you right back here